Chances are, if you've heard anything about intelligent design, you've heard that it's a faith-based, not a science-based idea. Or maybe you've even heard it's religion masquerading as science. Is that true?
So here we have PragerU promoting creationist crap on their channel. Intelligent design is just rebranded creationism. That's been debunked over and over again. It is pseudoscience. It all comes down to God of the gaps. We don't know something, therefore God did it.
The mystery of the origin of life. Building a living cell requires many proteins, and building proteins requires genetic information in DNA or some other equivalent molecule. Yet to date, no theory of undirected chemical evolution can explain the origin of the digital information needed to build the first living cell from simpler, non-living chemicals. In other words, the problem of getting life from non-life. Why is this a problem? There is simply too much information in the cell to be explained by chance alone. The probability of generating a section of DNA code capable of building just one functional protein by chance is vanishingly small.
So right off the bat, here's the problem with the complexity argument. DNA is so complex, but this so-called greater intelligence, this God, would be even more complex. So if you're saying the DNA must have had a designer, then you're saying this designer needed to have a designer, and so forth and so forth and so forth. So the God word absolutely answers nothing. And then notice he's talking about the complications of a cell and DNA, but the first life on earth did not have DNA. The first life on earth did not have DNA. It wasn't as complicated as today's cells. And we have no insight to that because we can't replicate the earth as it was 3.7 billion years ago. And life that doesn't have bones, that doesn't have cartilage, it's very difficult to get fossil evidence of. So we have no insight into the very beginnings of life and what that looked like, and yet here he is taking today's cell and today's DNA that didn't exist and saying, look how complex this is. And this is a con job from a con man. Now think about life. What is the definition of life? Is it something that replicates? Well, if you go to your kitchen sink, pour in some dishwashing liquid and turn the water on, you get a whole lot of bubbles. You turn the water off. If you turn the water back on, you'll get even more bubbles. So is that life? Is that the definition? Well, what about, well, it has to replicate and it has to eat. Well, what if the shell of that bubble repels certain things, but other things can get in, and then once it gets in, it can't leave? Is that eating? Is that the definition of the most basic definition of life? So think of it that way, and we have no insight. We can't study what this was. If we did have the insight, we would have the answers. But since we don't, we have a gap in our understanding. And all this creationist crap gets right down to God of the gaps. We don't know, or we don't know yet, therefore God did it. But we do know this. We do know if you have the perfect design for something, you don't have failure. Because at the onset, you have perfection. You have the perfect design. But when you look at life, and now over 99% of existing species are now extinct, we don't see that perfection at the beginning, and no error, and no death, and no waste. What we see is failure after failure after failure. What we see is evidence for trial and error in evolution rather than starting with this perfect design. So once again, complexity is not solved by evoking something that's even more complex. And notice how they don't even define what this greater intelligence is. Now, obviously, they mean the God of the Bible. So basically, the argument is we don't know. We have a gap in science, And therefore, it's these specific men claiming to speak for God that somehow had more legitimacy than the millions of other men making the same claim. This is not science. This is pseudoscience. This is a con man pushing his con job, and shame on PragerU for promoting this nonsense. This stuff has been debunked over and over again. It's tired, and here we go again. Answers absolutely nothing. Anyway, that's my video. Thanks for watching. Until next time.